All right, today we're going to talk about the immigrants' experience. What happened once they came over to the United States? How did they live their lives? What did they have to face? Did they have a tough time? Did they have an easy time? And what was it like living in their communities? What I decided to do today is dumb it down a little bit, not be so technologically savvy. I've got some pictures on the board here, and as we go through them, I'll drop them. I'm also going to try to make this as quick as possible, so bear with me. If I miss some things, we will have time to cover all the important information in class tomorrow. So, whether or not these immigrants were living with relatives or with other people from their same culture or are completely trying to blend into America on their own, they all had some tough choices to make. Where do we go? What do we do for money? What do we do for fun? Do we learn English? Do we teach our children the old traditions? Or do we leave them behind? All this while facing extreme poverty and discrimination. The number one biggest difficulty was finding work. Now, it's no coincidence that these immigrants came in at the biggest period of industrialization in the U.S. There are hundreds of new businesses and companies and industries that needed unskilled laborers willing to do lots of work for little money in terrible conditions. Immigrants were the best option for those groups. Steel mills, railroad companies, garment factories could hire these desperate people to work for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for next to nothing. Take a look at this city. This city is jam-packed with people. They need work. They came here for a reason. And you can see a mixture of people speaking all various different languages, practicing different religions, all within this one picture. Therefore, they'll do anything that they need to survive. What was unskilled labor, though? Unskilled labor is anything that didn't need training outside of a couple of hours of here's how you hold the shovel, or here's how you hold the axe. Here's some pictures of some Italian rag pickers. It was their job to pick up rags from the streets and reuse them, bring them to paper factories and garment factories so that they could recycle the trash from around the street. You didn't need much of an education to do that. All right. Another big job for immigrants was coal mining or working in a steel mill. Whatever it was back-breaking work where either you're taking a hammer and smashing some stuff or you're lifting up heavy chunks of metal to make sure that things are in the right place at the factory. It was tough work. Look how dirty and filthy these people are. You'll get a chance to see these pictures a little closer tomorrow and really throughout the rest of the week in class, but this was the most difficult work that people could do. And why could the immigrants do it? Because no one else wanted to do it, and no one else wanted to do it for as cheap as they were willing to do it. You know who made the best employees? Women and children. Why? Because they were willing to work for a lot less money, and they weren't going to complain much, and most importantly, they had little tiny fingers that could reach their hands into little tiny machinery and pull out little tiny jams, so that way pluck out what's breaking the machine starts running again, and hopefully they have gotten out in time to start working again. The conditions in these factories, however, were atrocious, and very often those children and women who would reach their hands into those machines would lose their hands. And there wasn't exactly a hospital right around the corner for a lot of these people, so they would unfortunately suffer. It wasn't just in factories that they would work. Here we see an example of a sweatshop. Now, sweatshops aren't just factories filled with hundreds of workers. This is a simple apartment in New York City in which people are sewing suits together. Here, I only count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in that whole picture, but that's 6 people crammed into a tiny space with no air conditioning, all forced to have sharp objects cutting things up, and if they screw up, they don't get paid. Where would they live? These people were forced to live in terrible conditions. Why? Because they didn't make enough money to have nice houses. So one of the reasons that they had been writing home to bring their family over so much was because rent was expensive. Without enough rent, they couldn't live a decent life. So they were forced to live in these tenement houses. A tenement house is where multiple families would stay in one location, one house, or really one apartment room, and you'd have 3 families living in one room altogether. Here's an example. You see on top of the oven, that's the stove that they use to cook their food and heat the room, they have their trunks where they keep their clothing, and a bag which most likely has some more of their clothing. They lay out right all along the floor, against the wall. It looks like they have a bed built into the wall and another bed underneath that. This was what life was like for a large majority of the immigrants coming into the country, especially in cities like New York and Boston. Along with the bad comes the good, though. Although you'd be living in a terrible situation, every immigrant child would receive a free education here in the United States. Here you see a picture of young immigrants saluting the flag. One child is leading the Pledge of Allegiance. Back in their old country, they would never get an education. Even if they had a little bit more money, they would still need to work hard in order to maintain their life as it was. They would never get an education. These children were able to. But this brings up another problem: assimilation. Do you just go about your life the way you lived it back in your home country? Let's say if you're a German immigrant, do you go live with other Germans, speak German, practice whatever religion it is they would practice in Germany, some form of Protestantism most likely? Do you work for Germans? Do you ever need to learn English? Now, some people would deal with that, and others would say, well, maybe I should probably fit in with America a little bit more. Maybe I should learn English. Maybe I should talk to people who aren't German. This is where you found the most problems between parents and children, because the parents had very little interest in assimilating, while the kids had very little interest in their old traditions. The kids who go to school with other immigrants from other nationality who speak different languages aren't speaking their native languages on the streets. They're speaking the common language, English. When they go to school, they're learning English. When they go to school, they're learning about all these new traditions. They don't particularly care about the old ones. Women also had new roles. They were able to actually work. They had more freedom than they used to. If a woman wanted to walk down a street on her own, unsupervised, she was more than welcome to. She could buy whatever she wanted if she had the money to. One thing these new immigrants faced was severe discrimination. People in America had been discriminating against immigrants for a very long time. This was not new. However, the old immigrants before 1880 had lighter skin. They blended in a little bit better. Most often spoke English. So it wasn't strange to see an immigrant. These new immigrants had darker skin. They were Catholic, they were Jewish, they definitely did not speak English. They stood out significantly, and anytime someone stands out, it makes them different, and when they're different, they're discriminated against. The Americans, who did not like these immigrants coming into their country, were labeled nativists. A nativist is someone who believes they are the natives of this country and therefore they are better than all these immigrants. Let's ignore the irony of people who immigrated to America calling themselves nativists. I'm sure the Native Americans would have a lot of fun to say about that. But what they were fearing was that these immigrants were going to take their jobs. They were contributing to the severe increase of crime and poverty in this country. They were dirty. They were scared of these people. They did not like what was happening to their society. And these nativists would prevent them from getting jobs. They would prevent them from going to certain schools. They would socially discriminate against them. And ultimately, physical violence was very common, particularly against Jewish and Asian immigrants. There was one incident in Denver in which an entire Chinese town was burned to the ground because the nativists felt that the Chinese immigrants were hurting their society. So what did they have going for them? Doesn't sound like immigrants had a great time here in the United States. Well, for the most part, it was a pretty difficult life, but it was better than their lives back home. Here they had a job, and here they did, or at least might, have a little bit of extra money with which to enjoy their lives. This included things like going to plays and musicals. Art and music enrichment was incredible at this time. You started seeing artists from all over the world coming together, and all of their ideas started blending. It was at this time that baseball became the American pastime, because no matter what country you came from, you could understand that sport. Some of you might think it's boring. However, it became the American pastime, especially in big cities like New York and Boston with high immigrant populations. What did they do for our country? Well, they provided us with workers, much needed workers, so that our booming industry could continue to grow. It transformed city life into a booming, bustling area. Arts and music, like we said before, were enriched incredibly. All these cultures coming together blended and created new styles. Provided economic growth. There's all these new people out there, therefore all those things that they're making have people that can buy them. If you need to go over any of the information again, rewatch it. If I went through it and you still have questions, you can ask them next time we have class. Enough said.